Well, howdy, y'all. All right, well, welcome back to another edition of Inverse NPR. This one's going to be very interesting at the end, and because there's something that blew my mind. Hang in there, here we go.
Today, a judge in Boston ruled that Harvard University's admissions process does not discriminate against Asian Americans.
So, despite all the other previous evidence that we have cited in the last few years, the federal court has ruled that Harvard does not discriminate. Here's why.
Asian Americans. An advocacy group sued the Ivy League school, accusing it of forcing Asian Americans to meet a higher standard of admission. Harvard disputed those claims during a trial last fall. NPR's Alyssa Nadworny joins us in the studio to talk more. Welcome back.
Hi, Audie.
Remind us what was behind this lawsuit in the first place.
Yeah, so this case is all about Harvard's use of race in the admissions process. So the case started back in 2014 when an anti-affirmative action group called Students for Fair Admissions sued Harvard, alleging that the school discriminated against Asian American applicants in the admissions process. So Students for Fair Admissions, they allege that Harvard uses racial balancing to curate its student body and hold...
Now, I looked into this, and so let's see what some racial balancing would happen. Okay, so first off, and I like this because this is from an article published by Harvard. So IQ has robust findings for not just poverty, but also for several other social categories. As the bell curve suggested, poverty and crime are related. Therefore, it is likely that using the same IQ, SES, and age regressors, if I ran the same logit regression, I would find that IQ is a stronger indicator of crime as well. It is likely that this extends to race as well, given that the authors of the bell curve were able to relate race and poverty. And I know that an increase in IQ has a negative effect on the probability someone is below the poverty line. Furthermore, this study would give reason to diminish affirmative action, since IQ is a stronger correlate of poverty and not socioeconomic status. This means that people will succeed in education and in the workforce regardless of their family income and background. Therefore, finding IQ as a better indicator than socioeconomic status helps confirm the bell curve's hypothesis that cognitive elite are self-isolating above the poverty line. Fair enough. Now, this is race and gender. The majority of these people are female cross races. We know that. Here's a trend showing that SAT math scores are generally lower for women than men. I'm not entirely happy with the source, but whatever. Again, another one. But this also shows that women are improving over the decades on their math performance. Now, let's just take a breakdown here of what you would, using social justice warrior reasoning, using feminist reasoning, what you would expect to see. You would expect to see Harvard having a 60% white, both male and female, more white women than men. About 20% Latino, about 3% mixed race, less than 1% Hawaiian or Native Pacific Islander, and about 6% Asians. They would expect to have about 13% black and about, let's say, 1-2% Native American. So Harvard should only really have about 6% Asians if they're going by racial representation, but they say they're not. They say they're going by merit or whatever. So let's check this out. Race gaps and math SAT scores. Holy crap. Holy crap. So, amazingly, black students cluster on the lower half, and Asian students dominate on the upper half. And white people are almost perfectly in the middle. Latinos are to a lesser extent. So it goes like this for blacks, this for Latinos, this for whites, which is almost like a perfect bell curve, and this for Asians. Now, this is representation of high school, people who completed high school, then enrolled in a 2 or 4 year college from 1990 to 2015. So more than 80% of Asians that graduate high school go to college. 80%. And we know from this other graph that those are mostly women. Here's a total. So the most people that finish high school go to some kind of higher education. You have the white people here, which is a little bit below average. Actually, everyone's below average. So Asians are actually dragging this whole stat up. Then you have the blacks here and the Hispanics. They're sort of right there. About half. A little bit about half. Half of blacks and half of Hispanics who go to, or who complete high school go to college. Now look at this data. Certificates and degrees conferred by race ethnicity between 2004 and 2015. So these are certificates. And this is change from 2004 for the last decade, pretty much. Roll back from 2004 to 2005 to 2015. A 35% increase total. A 23% increase in whites getting certificates. 30% increase in blacks. 2/3 increase in Hispanics. That's amazing. And a 1/3 increase in Asians and natives. And there are no data on mixed people there. But change from 2013 to 2014, there's actually fewer people overall getting certificates. Fewer whites, fewer blacks, more Hispanics, more Asians, more natives, and more mixed people. So associate's degrees, we see an overall increase over a decade for whites getting associate's degrees, but a recent decrease in it. An overall massive jump, 60% blacks increasing, getting an associate's, 130%, 54%, and 20%. I mean, amazing. Right? And but that's decreasing for whites, but increasing for everyone else, except for Native Americans. Bachelor's degrees, we see a smaller increase in whites, and still huge increase in Hispanics over here. Huge increase, well, not huge, but a third increase, more than a third there. And again, a continuing decrease for Native Americans. Master's degrees, decreasing recently for whites, decreasing recently for blacks, increasing for Hispanics, and no change for Asians. That's interesting. There's huge growth, by the way, in this 2 or more races column, mixed column. Huge increase. And that'll be important for later on. Doctoral degrees, again, recently decreasing for whites, increasing for everyone else except for Asians. But that's understandable, considering that most of them, where is it? Considering that most of them that grow was right there. Most of them that graduate high school go to college. And it's been that way since they've been keeping this data. So, now, that's all very interesting. And I want to get to this. But I'll go back to it in a second. Let's finish this article first.
To curate its student body and holds Asian Americans to a higher standard than others in the admissions process. But Harvard said it doesn't. Rather, they argued they use a holistic review. So they look at lots of different things about a student: test scores, extracurricular activities, life experiences. Race may be considered as part of the larger picture about a student, but it's not the only consideration. And it's interesting that in the trial, no one who had been rejected from Harvard actually testified on the plaintiff's behalf. But for Harvard's side, many students and alumni testified about the benefits of diversity on campus.
So that is weird. She brings it up like a sort of snarky, no one testified for the plaintiff, but people testified for the defendant, saying diversity good.
How did the judge explain this decision?
So Allison Burroughs, the federal district court judge in the case, she issued a 130-page decision upholding Harvard's admissions program, finding it, quote, passes constitutional muster. She said it, quote, it was not perfect, but that it ensures the diversity at Harvard, in part because of its race-conscious admissions.
So they don't hold Asians to a higher standard, even though clearly Asians would meet it, even though clearly they have been meeting it, and even though clearly, to be fair in their own diversity standard, they wouldn't have to let that many in to begin with. But yeah, okay, let's go on.
Her opinion referenced the current legal precedent for race-conscious admission, so Harvard and other schools are allowed to consider race as long as they consider other factors in the admissions process. So Harvard looks at applications with their holistic review, so that was perfectly constitutional.
What, if any, implications does this have for other schools and universities?
So Harvard issued a statement which kind of helps put this in perspective. They said that the court, quote, has recognized now is not the time to turn back the clock on diversity and opportunity. So for schools that already use race in admission.
What do you mean, not turn back the clock? Women have been the majority of college students for 40 years nearly. It's insane. They're still playing the victim, even though they're kicking everyone's ass. Where is it? Where is it? Yeah, there. They've been kicking ass for a long time. Yet still, we can't stop now. We can't stop now. We got to keep going.
They may have been anxious about the lawsuit. This decision could encourage them to stay the course. So Harvard's super selective, and not lots of colleges across are. Like, many students go to not selective universities. So I talked with Tiffany Jones at the Education Trust about this, and she says, despite that, it does matter what Harvard's and other institutions like Harvard do, because they educate our business leaders, politicians, and so they can help kind of steer the conversation. She also says this case, it goes beyond Harvard. It's about benefits of diversity.
Now, one, and this will go into something I want to draw conclusions to later on, so please hang in there with me. Business leaders. Now, I think 2 or 3 of these guys actually did go to Harvard, but they didn't graduate. These are a list of just some of the guys that dropped out of college and billions of dollars. And even that Brandon guy from Virgin Records or whatever, he dropped out of high school. He dropped out of school at 16. Michael Dell dropped out. Steve Jobs, drop out. Bill Gates, drop out. Evan Williams, Twitter guy, drop out. Mark Zuckerberg, drop out. Larry Ellison, Oracle founder, drop out. Jan Koum, WhatsApp, and he also worked at some other stuff, drop out. Uber guy, drop out. Whole Foods guy, Mr. Mackey, okay. The guy from Austin himself, John Mackey, okay. Founder of Whole Foods, who eventually sold out to Amazon, drop out. Harvard does not educate our business leaders at all. In fact, most of our business leaders that are of any notoriety drop out of college entirely, which will go into women not being able to find good men to marry, degrees, status, yada, 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 and some other stuff I'll address later on. But they clearly lie.
And a benefit of a diverse student body.
This decision helps to reinforce this idea that there are legal ways to incorporate a racial equity focus in the efforts of higher education leaders to create opportunities and support the success of underrepresented students of color.
What's the rest of the response, and what happens next?
So the group that sued Harvard, Students for Fair Admissions, they say they're disappointed by the ruling and they will appeal. That group, SFFA, it's led by this conservative activist named Edward Bloom. And experts say that he is on a mission to get this case to the Supreme Court. Bloom was behind another affirmative action case involving the University of Texas at Austin in 2000.
Going back to Michael Dell. Michael Dell, University of Texas dropout at 19. One of these other guys, I think maybe Mackey, one of these other dudes. I think Harvard's got 2 or 3 of these dudes that dropped out, and UT's got 2, maybe 3. So clearly you don't need a college education to make an ass load of money.
Austin in 2016. In that case, the Supreme Court upheld race-based admissions. But right now, the Supreme Court looks different than it did back then. Of course, that's steps away. So, we'll see where the appeals process leads.
That's NPR's Alyssa Nadworny. Thanks for this update.
Thanks.
Today.
All right. Now, I hope you hung in there with me. So here's a few things that this decision is going to do that are bad. All right. One, this is going to be used by China to recruit people for espionage, to recruit Chinese students and Chinese American students for espionage. And the government's already been looking into this. The FBI has already been looking into this. And NPR already had a story about it. Here it is. Okay. In general, we know that women's IQs cluster in the middle. Right? Most stupid people, men are stupider than most women, and men can be smarter than most women too. So men exist out here. There's stupid men and there's smart men, but most women are kind of in the middle. And we know that IQ is the best indicator for economic success, and that smart people, according to Harvard's own publication, are self-isolating above the poverty line. When we know that the majority of college students for the last 40 years nearly have been women, and that's across race. We know that women don't do as good as math. Math is hard. Again, redundant there. We also know that, this is race, or something like that. We also know population numbers, what we should see. And already we see more white women, black women, more women of all races in college and completing college, and then complaining about it because they can't find good men. We know that by race, this is how the SAT scores fall, math. And we're always talking about STEM degrees. Well, this is probably why you don't see a lot of minorities in STEM fields, because they're not very good at the math. And Asians really good at it. We know that a huge majority, 80+% of all Asians that graduate high school go on to college of some kind, 2 or 4 year degree. And that it's such an impressive representation that they're dragging the stat up for everyone else. That's including white people. White people are below this baseline. Everyone's below Asians here. And that makes total sense if you think about how good they are at the math. We see increases for everyone, these are probably women, all across the board, except for recent decreases for whites. And that's probably white men leaving college and just not going. And why are white men not going to college? Because, they don't have to. In fact, if you want to make women happy, if you want to, marry McKinsey Bezos, you want to have money. And she'll divorce you anyway and take a third of your stuff anyway. But why are people dropping out? Why are men not going to college? Why are there fewer men in college than women? Because they don't need to be to get what they want out of women. Now, here's the thing I might do a whole separate video on, and this blew my mind. And this is from 2000, from the Darwin Research Institute. Holy crap. All right, so blacks, 85, IQ 85. Whites, 102. Asians, 106. What's it? Decision times, slower, intermediate, faster. This is going to go from black, white to Asian. Cranial capacity, larger in Asians. Cortical neurons, larger number in Asians. Now, this is the most interesting thing, and I'll probably do a separate video on this. This is biology right here. Gestation time, shorter. Skeletal development, earlier. Motor development, earlier. Dental development, earlier. Age of first intercourse, earlier. Age of first pregnancy, earlier. Lifespan, shortest. Intermediate across the board for whites. And later, longest across the board for Asians. The Big Five personality testing. I won't get into that. Aggressiveness, blacks, higher. Whites, intermediate, lower. Cautiousness, blacks lower, intermediate, whites, and higher Asians. Blacks are less cautious. Impulsivity, higher for blacks. Self-concept, ego, swagger stuff, higher. Sociability, higher. They're more group-oriented in sort of an outgoing sense. Think of it as self-concept and sociability as swagger. Cautiousness, lower cautiousness means willing to take more risks. Reproduction, 2-egg twinning, higher in blacks. Sex characteristics, larger in blacks. Intercourse frequencies, higher. Permissive attitudes, higher. Sexually transmitted diseases, higher. Marital stability, lower. Law abridgedness, lower. Mental health, lower. And all these things make sense if you think about the environments they evolved in. Because remember, evolution doesn't give a crap about anything but survive, reproduce. And if you don't need to be smart to survive and reproduce, it's not gonna force you to. If you have to have a shorter gestation period to survive and reproduce, because they're living in a jungle, there's a lot of food around. You have to develop early, pump out babies, because you got a high disease rate, and you're probably gonna die early. Whites are intermediate, suspiciously, and look at this 2-egg twinning. That's multiple pregnancies at a time, or multiple fetus pregnancies at a time. Twice as high for blacks as whites, and 4 times as high for blacks than Asians. This makes perfect sense in an evolutionary biology sense. This also probably goes into, what do they call it? Game theory for gametes, and the ovum, spermatozoa, or just egg sperm evolution, which would help to explain, well, how should I say, certain things like preeclampsia in black women, higher than most other women. It's competitive. I'll probably go into this more later, but what people need to understand is these things make sense in an evolutionary sense. And then you look over here, it kind of shows itself over here too, right? So whites are intermediate, and this bell curve right here in this math SAT score is perfect for whites. Blacks, earlier, they don't need to have very much patience. They don't need to be very cautious to survive, reproduce. All these things help to explain they're lower, because they don't need to be good at math. Asians, on the other hand, they've kind of taken a more cautious, slower, more contemplative avenue towards survival and reproduction. Probably because they've had to. And then this goes to the whole thing about women nowadays. It's suspicious that they're trying to, how should I say, not only get men out of college, but get certain types of men out of college. And we can see this showing up in this giant growth rate of 2 or more races in college. So I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but one could say that the goal is the really smart people, they're not going to go to college. The real inventors and elites are just going to drop out and do what they want. And the only people in college are going to be the ones that are there to, how should I say, dumb down the population. Yeah, you have to be kind of smart to get into college to begin with. But if you do, they don't want you to be super duper smart. They want you to be kind of stupid. They're surrounding all these women with a bunch of people that aren't really that smart. And the ones that are smart, the ones that consistently are smart, and that would actually be a benefit to the society, they're saying, no, go screw yourselves. So there you go, guys. And I might actually do a little bit more on this over here. But all you really need to know about why women can't find good men to marry is because all the really good men, they don't go to college. They're college dropouts. Heck, that Virgin Mobile guy or whatever, he dropped out of high school. He dropped out, and he's skiing with naked models attached to his back. That's a literal statement. All right. Well, you guys have a nice day. And always remember to go your own way. Yours truly, Ed.